My name is Bogdan, and I would like to present today the difference between constructive criticism and ordinary criticism. And I would like to start by asking you two questions. How many of you ever happen to disagree with some other person's opinion in your life? Thank you very much. How many of you then happen to feel the desire to be criticized while disagreeing with somebody else and falling short to meet somebody else's expectations or desires? Thank you very much. I think Abraham Lincoln got it right when he wisely concluded that whoever has or wants to criticize has to have the heart to help. And that is very important, and in my opinion is the very core principle of constructive criticism. Looking at the title, you might ask yourself, what does he mean by constructive criticism? And what I mean by that is very simple. Whenever I am criticizing you, that's constructive criticism. And whenever you criticize me, that's going to be destructive. So, moving forward, in all seriousness, I would like to reveal some of my thoughts with you in discussing about what constructive criticism is and what is not. And I would like to first start by revealing what constructive criticism is not. First, criticism is not constructive if it is not transformational. And whenever we are opening our mouth, we should rather make sure that our desire is to help rather than condemn, punish, manipulate, or even humiliate the person who is being criticized. Second, criticism is not and is not going to be constructive if it doesn't address the issue. Very often we are focusing on the person. And every time when criticism is focusing on the person, the results will be almost always faulty and nonsensical, and the whole process becomes merely a self-obfuscational process. Last but not least, criticism cannot be constructive if it doesn't contribute to any improvements. While we figure out what constructive criticism is not, let's see if we can find out what constructive criticism is. And while you are looking on the screen and see the definition that I come up with, I would like to point out that the main difference between constructive criticism on one side and destructive or ordinary criticism on the other side is the fact that whenever I'm criticizing somebody, I'm not holding that person as guilty and faulty by default. And that's something very important to consider, because very often we focus our all concerns toward the problem instead of the issue. Probably you will be better served by reminding yourself only these four very important principles, which I call the 4 C's of constructive criticism. I mark them in red so that you can better see them. And that's very important because constructive criticism has to be civil first in order to be constructive, meaning it has to be based on reason and action, not on emotion and reaction. Then it has to be conciliatory, and then it has to be credible, which can only be achieved by working together, not by pointing fingers at one another or blaming each other, for that matter. Last but not least, criticism has to be considerate. And that's the very important and probably the most important point of the 4 C's that I would like you to be focused on. Because each time when we are criticizing somebody, we should have in mind the redemptive aspect towards the one being criticized, rather than focusing ourselves on futile and nugatory personal accusations. And while these 4 C's constitute the foundation of constructive criticism, we have to keep in mind that we have to build 3 pillars on top of this foundation that will hold the whole edifice of constructive criticism. And these 3 pillars are think differently, talk differently, and act differently. And that's important because everything in life starts with a thought. As you can see, you saw a thought following the famous saying, and you end up reaping a destiny. Then we move forward. Talk differently doesn't mean necessarily talk more. It means talk less, but say more. And that's very important as well, because talking is much like when we are throwing a stone into the ocean. It cannot be taken back. In pretty much the same way, when we are saying things, when we are saying words, they cannot be recalled. They are there to hurt or to bless somebody while we are saying that. Last but not least, it is very important to understand that constructive criticism cannot be complete unless it sums up all these 3 factors: acting differently, It's very important. Thinking and talking is a prerequisite for acting differently. But without acting, those three pillars are not three, are only two, and the whole edifice could be shaken up. While we saw the three steps that we should focus on in constructive criticism, what you are seeing right now on the screen are three negative steps that you should never focus on. The only reason I put them there is because I want you to know that you should never ever focus on these negative steps in your life when you are criticizing somebody. Fact is, whenever you are criticizing somebody, having in mind this negative focus, your criticism will always be destructive. So I would like to move forward, and while you are looking on the screen, with regards to the goals that I had in mind when I put this presentation together, I would like to reiterate my conclusion in saying that whenever you are criticizing somebody, you're supposed to be concerned about one thing. Before you are opening your mouth, the courage to speak must be matched by the capacity to understand and the wisdom to listen. That constructive criticism can only emerge from a sincere and honest heart, and also by a compassionate attitude toward the person who is being criticized, whoever the person might happen to be. Moreover, whenever we are offering this criticism, or we are accepting this criticism, both the giver and the receiver will have the opportunity to share in this transformational goal while being entrusted with a vital perception that they have been helped in the process. I would like you to close your eyes and just follow me a few seconds. How nice it will be if we can envision a better world where, despite all of our temporary disagreements, we can still agree with each other, honor each other's opinion, and tolerate each other. How inspiring, how refreshing, how motivational, and how civic that will be, isn't it? Now, you can have your eyes open. Thank you very much.